Well, that was a natural pause. Thank you very much. Welcome to the Macnamara Election Forum, presented by TWiSK, this week in St Kilda. Good evening, I'm Bernadine Voss. Thank you, TWiSK, for inviting me to be your moderator tonight. I know many of you in the room through my time as a local independent councillor and mayor, and tonight I'm going to be your independent moderator for this event. I'll start with an acknowledgement to country. We respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the people of the Kulin Nations. We pay our respects to the elders past and present. We acknowledge and uphold their continuing relationship to this land. Welcome to the live stream also. This event is being recorded and will be available on TWiSK in the coming days. But first, I'd really like us to pause for a moment and really feel the significance of this occasion. In a world where violence too often drowns out voices, where fear can fracture communities, and where democracy is under threat in too many places, we are here together in peace and in purpose, in power. We're not just attending an event, we're honouring a system built on courage, participation, and belief in something bigger than ourselves. No, democracy isn't perfect, but it gives us something extraordinary, a place to debate without bloodshed, a process to choose without coercion, a future that we shape, not one that shapes us. So let's take a breath together and feel the quiet strength in this room, the unity among difference, the dignity of discourse, and the unstoppable force of one person, one vote. That's the beating heart of democracy. That's why we're here. In the next 2 weeks, you will help elect a representative for Macnamara in the House of Representatives in Canberra. The winner will be one of these candidates here before you. And if history is any guide, the winner in Macnamara will be decided by your preferences. We're here to share and gather information on who to vote for, rather than who to vote against. Tonight is about the candidates. It's about the policies. It's about you, the people of Macnamara. It's also about fairness, listening, and respect. The organisers expect you to keep it civil and give every speaker a fair hearing. Applause is welcome, but please don't heckle or interject. Hecklers and disruptors will be asked to be quiet or leave. Do you agree? Thank you. About the format, tonight the first hour is devoted to the candidates. We'll hear from them about their policies with the emphasis on local issues, including some very hot topics: safety and social cohesion, cost of living and housing affordability, and healthcare. Each candidate will also have an opportunity to talk on one extra topic of their choice. Later in the first hour, to lighten the mood, we'll ask candidates to answer a barrage of playful but tricky questions in just 1 minute. I look forward to that one. Then we'll start taking audience questions and we'll give each candidate a 1-minute opportunity to respond. So get those questions ready. As advised in our recent emails, the questions must be limited to less than 30 words or 30 seconds, and no preambles. Just your question, please. That's so we can get through as many questions as possible. And finally, each candidate will sum up their pitch for your vote in 2 minutes or less. So, without further ado, let's introduce the candidates. First up, we've got Josh Burns, ALP MHR for Macnamara. Sonia Simmons, the Greens candidate. Benson Saulo, Liberal candidate. Welcome to you all. So let's get started with our candidates' opening remarks. We start by inviting each candidate to the podium for 3 minutes to make their pitch for your support. In each of our segments, we'll start with a different speaker so that everyone gets a chance to go first and last. Greg Day from TWiSK has a bell, and he'll keep time and ring the bell when you have 10 seconds left. Like that. And then furiously when time is up. Like that. So we actually drew lots for the order of the speakers. I actually had some cards there, and first up we have Josh, then Sonia, and then Benson. So, welcome to the podium, Josh. Thank you.
Well, good evening, and I too acknowledge that we gather on the lands of the Boonwurrung people and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I thank Greg and the team at TWiSK for putting on tonight, and Bernadine for moderating, for Sonia and Benson for joining us, and for, in fact, the way in which they've conducted themselves throughout this campaign. It's been very civil and thoughtful and passionate, and I congratulate you both, and also Benson, happy birthday, mate. Where else would you want to spend it? Friends, my family came to this country and gathered here and settled down in Macnamara. They came here fleeing persecution. They came here looking to set up a better life. And it was here in our community that I grew up, that I live in. I live just down the road in St Kilda. And I think about what it means to be the representative of our community here in St Kilda, but also in Canberra. It's a combination of ensuring that we have a seat at the table so that we can get things done for our community, but also that we have input in the national conversation that helps shape the future of our country. Now, I think about the work that we've already done, the fact that we've invested in the National Theatre upgrade, the fact that we have the St Kilda Adventure Playground that's finally going to get a much-needed upgrade so it can be enjoyed by our younger citizens for generations to come. The fact that we have partnered with the state government to complete the pier redevelopment, which looks fantastic, but we're going to connect it to the boulevard right there on the beach. Now, the fact that we have a Medicare urgent care clinic right here in the Alfred that's been visited by over 20,000 people in our community since we've come into government. The fact that we have a headspace in South Melbourne that is being utilised to support young people who are experiencing difficulty in mental health right now. Now, all of these things have happened because we have had a seat at the table. All of these things have happened is because Macnamara has had representation in Canberra as part of a government that cares deeply about our community. But it's not just about the local things that I'm so passionate about. It's also about the national policies that this election is about. And when I think about what is at stake at this election, I think about young people in our community, of what my family went through and what they sought in our community, of opportunity, of access to healthcare, of access to education, of access to the ability to buy their own home in the place that they want to live. Now, this election, we are going to be supporting people to access the skills via free TAFE, to ensure that if you leave university, you're going to have 20% cut off your university debt, that we are going to try and make it possible to buy your first home with only a 5% deposit so that we guarantee the purchase of that house, and young people won't have to pay lenders' mortgage insurance, saving people around $20,000 per home. And that this community also stands for climate action. And as we undergo the largest transition of our economy in the history of our country towards renewable energy, this community matters, and I'll continue to fight for it in Canberra. Thanks very much. I'm looking forward to the debate.
Thank you, Josh. Now let's welcome Sonia Simmons.
This always happens. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're on, the Bunurong and Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nations, and to thank you all for being here tonight. It matters, and it matters that we're gathered here today, so thank you. For over 25 years, I've worked in the charity sector to make communities safer and stronger until two things happened that changed the course of my life. One is that I was working with Melbourne City Mission to build youth crisis accommodation for kids sleeping rough. It's called Front Yard. It's on King Street and it's there now. And two, that at the same time, I found myself unable to get a rental with my two kids after a marriage breakdown. The day before we had to be out of our home, I put a desperate note on Facebook. Does anyone know of anything? A friend of a friend said we could stay in a little granny flat out the back of her mum's house in the Dandenong Ranges. And so we did. We bunked down there for 3 months through winter, wrapped in blankets to stay warm, no heating, no insulation, no Wi-Fi and no letterbox. And as you can imagine, it was really hard to keep our lives on track. My daughter started calling me the unlucky mummy, which I hated. And my son stopped eating food that was touching other food, which he still struggles with today. In our wealthy country, 400 people a week are made homeless. Some end up on the couch or in a car. Many are women and many have their children with them like I did. Housing is just the pointy end of an inequality crisis that is changing the shape of our country and our community. It's a crisis of fairness that means, for example, you pay more tax than Netflix, and for a whole generation of young people, home ownership is a dying dream. Tonight you'll hear from us about safety, cohesion and cost of living, and I want to be clear about where to place responsibility. It belongs with the major parties who have presided over slowly escalating, now skyrocketing crisis of inequality for decades and done little but tinker at the edges. I am here to say we can lift our ambition. We can expect more from our leadership. And here in Macnamara, your vote is unusually powerful. There's only 300 votes between Labor and the Greens here in this seat. You can send me, an MP independent of the major parties, to a powerful position on the crossbench where I'll go to work for you, for our community, for us, and for the deep reform, the courageous reform that we need to fix this crisis. And so tonight I'll talk about things like mental health and dental into Medicare, 50-cent public transport fares, an enormous public housing build that takes the pressure off the market. And I'll tell you this, we can't keep voting for the same two parties and expecting a different result. If you want change, the first step is to vote for it.
Thank you, Sonia. Now I'd like to welcome our last speaker for opening introduction, Benson Solo. Thank you.
Thanks, Bernadine, and also thanks to Greg, and thank you all for being here tonight and celebrating my birthday with me, so thank you very much. I could not think of any place better to be than here tonight. I wanted to share a little bit about my background, because many of you may not know who I am and what I've been able to achieve over 15 years of my professional and personal career. But my connection to country here is actually from my mum. So I'm connected to the Wemba Wemba, Jadawajali, Wirragai and Gunditjmara nations of Western Victoria, and from New Ireland Province in Papua New Guinea. And where I draw a lot of my inspiration from is actually from my parents' story. So my mum grew up in a tin hut with dirt floors on the outskirts of Bordertown, and by the pure virtue of being Aboriginal, they had to live outside of town. So she actually grew up in a paddock. And in that paddock was the local tip. And you know that saying that one man's trash is another man's treasure? And that was very much my mum's upbringing. So her toys and her siblings' toys, the furniture was actually all from the local tip, discarded by the locals. On my father's side, he comes from a very small, remote village in New Ireland province. And to get to my father's island, you have to take 3 island hops up in a plane, drive 3 hours along a dusty dirt track. And on one side, you've got mountains, and during World War II, it was quite a strategic. So you've got gun turrets that are jutting out of the caves, getting reclaimed by the jungle. And on the other side, you've got a beautiful deep blue ocean that drops away. And you come to a small village, and my father is actually born on that beach. So where our village lies, it's called Lafu. And we don't actually know how old my father is, but when he was about 20 years old, he was sponsored to come to Australia. He was a young minister. And my mum and dad met in Bible college, and it was actually a strong foundation for the way that my upbringing was, my older brother and older sister, in regards to having a rich culture on Aboriginal and Papua New Guinean culture, as well as faith as a cornerstone in our household. And it was actually in 2011 that my world changed. So I'd come through working in the bank from the age of 15 through as a bank teller. But in 2011, I was appointed the Australian Youth Representative to the United Nations. And I travelled right around Australia engaging young people to understand issues that impact them. And there was 3 key things: mental health, there was climate change, as well as the uncertainty of the future. And I represented their voice at the United Nations General Assembly and led 2 negotiations on behalf of young Australians. And they focused on the global financial crisis impact on young people. That really set the tone for my forward career. And most recently, I was appointed an Australian Consul General and Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner. I've been able to operate at the highest levels of governments across Australia, as well as the US, to be able to shape policy, to be able to drive Australia's economic agenda. And it's that type of leadership that I would like to bring and represent your voices in Canberra and represent Macnamara. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Benson. So now we'll move on to our first topic segment, number 1, which is safety and social cohesion. So it's been a hot topic in the council elections and the recent Paran by-election. Community safety and threats to social cohesion, including anti-Semitism, have captured headlines and conversations across our neighbourhoods. So I'd like to ask first Sonia. There's the microphone, just pop it on. What have you heard from voters and what are you advocating?
Thank you so much. So the way the Greens campaign is that we door knock. That's sort of our main way of reaching voters because we don't take big campaign donations. So we've door knocked our way across the electorate and sort of doubled back. And many of you might have been door knocked by us. We've knocked on 85,000 doors. And community safety is one of the top 3 or 4 issues that comes up across the doors. And it ranges from sort of low-level survival crime to some more fairly serious things. And of course, anti-Semitism has come up in parts of the electorate as well. So it's something we're taking incredibly seriously. And I just want to speak a little bit to our position on it. So the way we think about it is being smart on safety and tough on the causes of crime. And so I just want to start with smart on safety a little bit, which is first of all that people often raise issues like surveillance or extra police, and I'm absolutely in support of the appropriate kinds of surveillance and policing that is needed. But I also want to make the point that surveillance in and of itself is not enough to address the rise in low-level crime and the feeling of community unsafety that we've been experiencing. There is a community safety roundtable that's being chaired by Ian Gray, which is being undertaken in the city of Port Phillip, and I want to raise that because I'm really interested to hear what comes out of that roundtable, and we will certainly take that on board going forward. I have every faith in Ian to put together some really good proposals. So our Smart on Safety proposal would be to revitalise key shopping strips with a 2% vacancy tax on businesses that are left vacant for more than 6 months. We'd like to really work towards reducing dereliction and any sort of invitation of antisocial behaviour that happens, where you see that sort of the broken window theory of empty shop fronts and things just get a bit rough. I mean, I can think of places on Bay Street and Chapel Street and Inkerman Street that reflect that, and that is concerning, alongside better lighting and well-maintained public spaces, of course. Those are the things that can help there. But also, we want to be tough on the causes of crime, and as I've suggested in my introductory speech, that involves getting really serious about rising inequality and homelessness in our community. And so we'd like to tackle homelessness with a housing first model, a little bit like Finland has, with wraparound support services. We want to be able to fund mental health care and frontline services to adequately support people through that situation and into housing, and raise Centrelink payments so that we can stop poverty in the community. That's something that we have on the table, and we're alone in doing so, and it absolutely must be a part of the mix when we're talking about community safety. As an example, Brisbane's Common Ground project has kept people safely housed and out of emergency departments and the justice system up in Queensland, and it's a fantastic model. The other thing I want to raise is that in Elwood the other week, there was a pamphlet that was leafleted around which spoke to Australia for the White Man, and there have been boot camps on the foreshore. These issues, among others, have really raised anti-Semitism as a concern in the community, and one of my dear friends, in fact, was a victim of this abuse.
Thank you, Sonia.
All right.
We'll have to leave it there. We're on time frame tonight.
Sorry.
Benson.
Oh, that's me. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. No, thank you very much. And look, it's actually the number one issue that's raised with me when we've been out door knocking. And we've literally knocked on thousands of doors right across the electorate. And it is a concerning issue that we've actually, across the Port Phillip Bay, we've seen crime and antisocial behaviour rise about 11.4%. And a few weeks ago, there was actually a bit of a march that took place from Fitzroy Street and came across and ended in Ackland Street. And what locals were saying is that they want clear and decisive action to address the rising crime and antisocial behaviour that we are experiencing across our communities. When we were out door knocking, I met a young girl. She's about 23 years old, just near the peanut farm. And she said, I tend not to catch the tram from the 96 at Ackland Street. She said, if I have to leave early to go to work, then I'll tend to walk up towards Luna Park and jump on the tram there. But if I am coming home late at night, she said she'll actually call her father to come and meet her and walk down. And it's that kind of experience that many people are having right across the electorate, and particularly vulnerable people. One of the commitments that we are making is actually around CCTV, because what we have seen is that across Bay Street as well as Clarendon Street, there is actually no public CCTV at this stage, which means that the police do not have the infrastructure to actually do their work. And I've met with the police across South Melbourne and also St Kilda, and they are crying out to be supported, because right now we've seen a state that has been very weak on crime, and we have seen youth crime rising. We've seen other crimes in regards to aggravated burglary, as well as cars being stolen. That has actually increased across not only Macnamara but also other areas. And right now the police feel hamstrung and not being encouraged to use the laws that are actually in place. So we need to do more. We need to actually support the police, but they also need the right infrastructure, and that's something that we're looking to bring in and support. And look, there is no silver bullet here when it comes to addressing crime, but as a deterrent, as a way to ensure that police have the right resources available to them, this is absolutely critical infrastructure that, quite frankly, should have already been in place. And this is, unfortunately, an outcome that we've seen under successive Labor governments at a state and also federal level, that there's the appropriate resources and infrastructure is just simply not there. An additional element, and this is something that's coming up, particularly for people that live along Beach Road, is the number of hooning that actually takes place, particularly in the summer months. We've just committed $150,000 to ensure that Port Phillip Bay can actually be, the Port Phillip Council here can actually be the trial site for anti-hoon cameras, which is actually to address some of the antisocial behaviour and the surrounding concerns that happen with that kind of behaviour going on. So we actually do need to be smart about crime, but we also need to address the crime that is actually impacting our communities. So thank you.
Thank you, Benson. Josh?
There's two aspects to this. The first one, obviously, is the law and order aspect. And while the Victoria Police is the responsibility of the state government, the question that we have asked ourselves is, what can we do to help? And Benson makes the correct point to say that the police and council have a proposal to increase CCTV. Now, we've committed $1.5 million for the City of Port Phillip to create a network of CCTV, which predominantly would operate on our major high streets, Ackland Street, Fitzroy Street, Clarendon Street, Bay Street and others, to be able to create a network of CCTV cameras, right? And that's really important. And resourcing for the state police is also really important. But also, this is a human issue. These are humans. and you need to help people at a human level as well. I had the Prime Minister here in St Kilda yesterday, and we announced $2.6 million for Streetside Medics. If you haven't heard of Streetside Medics, they're an organisation that has a mobile health unit that goes and provides direct health care and mental health care for people experiencing homeless. Now, if you want to break the cycle of homelessness, of alcohol and other drugs, of the constant cycle of dislocation, you need to treat people as people. And therefore, the services that we're investing in hopefully at least starts that process. The other aspect, obviously, is housing, and that's why we created the Housing Australia Future Fund, which is directly designed in collaboration with the community housing providers that do provide more wraparound services so that the housing wait list can actually be reduced. Yes, we do need to do more to support authorities. We also need to do more to help people. The other thing I wanted to touch on very quickly before Greg's two very quick bills run in succession of each other is to mention around social cohesion and the issue that Sonia also raised around the sort of neo-Nazis and far-right groups. You know, we had people not only marching in Elwood, we had them marching outside the steps of Parliament, you know, pretending to be these sort of tough idiots, frankly, and it was the worst sort of display of public of racism that I've seen. And so as the local member, I take my responsibility extremely seriously. I went on national television and called for laws to be toughened to ensure that we outlawed the Nazi salute as well as the Hakenkreuz, which is the Nazi swastika. I then set to work to deliver that law not only at a federal level but also with the Victorian government and the New South Wales government. You know, that work was detailed and it was hard, and we had to get that through 3 layers of government. It's not the only component of social cohesion that we need to tackle. But I do want to make the point that being of the community and for the community is important. We have seen those people also target the LGBTIQ community here in St Kilda at the Pride Centre. You know, we are stronger together by uniting against racism together. And I would say to all of you that, yes, you know, my daughter and I live in St Kilda. I want this to be a safe place for me and my community. But we're also stronger together when we show our humanity and we work together to protect our streets as well. Thank you very much.
Will be next. So topic number 2 is the cost of living and housing affordability. The cost of living is an issue for many. The total at checkouts has risen more than incomes for many. Both home buyers and renters are forking out more of their already tight budgets. Finding a flat, buying a home are increasingly difficult experiences. To you, Benson, first up. What have you heard from voters and what are you advocating? 3 minutes each.
What I've heard from voters is people are really doing it tough, absolutely. Businesses, household budgets, families are doing it really tough. They're up against the wall at the moment. And what we've seen, what's really pushing this has just been the government's lack of ability to be able to manage a federal budget, but it's also here at the state level as well when we are sitting on a significant amount of debt. And so there isn't a tax that the current government has not liked. And so everyone here is being saddled with greater levels of tax, and unfortunately that's impacting everyone's hip pocket. We've seen food prices going up by 13.3%. We've seen rents going up by 18% as well. So this is a really significant issue that's impacting everyone, because at the end of the day, the measure of a household is the ability to be able to care for that household. And unfortunately, with the current costs and impacts of people, that they are really doing it tough and they're up against the wall. I've met with a number of businesses right across the electorate, and a number of businesses are struggling to keep their doors open. And we've actually seen under this government the record high of insolvencies across the country in the last 2 years. And this is reflective of people not feeling safe to come out into the community, but also not having the money in their pocket to be able to spend and frequent the shops or the cafes that they have historically. And this is a huge reflection, or a damning reflection, in regards to interest rates that have continued to increase. We've seen 12 interest rates increase. We've seen one come down, but unfortunately at the last meeting of the RBA, they held interest rates, which tells us that the underlying economic factors are not there to actually lower our interest rates, which means if you have a mortgage of a $600,000 home, you're paying upwards of $50,000 on that mortgage. And while we'll talk about renters make up 50% of the electorate, the other 50% are homeowners and or with mortgages. And so it's people that are doing it tough. This should not be a kind of pitting homeowners versus renters, because everyone in this current climate, with the current economic factors and the current prices that continue to go up, everyone is absolutely doing it tough. And no one in this room, I would imagine, would be able to say that they're actually better off than what they were than just 2 years ago. And I think that is a direct reflection on a government that hasn't been able to manage inflation, hasn't been able to create the economic factors to bring down interest rates, and is actually taxing everyone at a state level, but also at a federal level, that is ultimately impacting your hip pocket. So there's some really clear factors that we need to address, and this is something that the Coalition will actually do in regards to bringing down the fuel excise and being able to address some of the state and also federal taxes that is impacting everyone. Thank you.
Josh?
Well, I would respectfully point out the fact that we inherited inflation at 6% and it's now got a 2 in front of it. I'd also say that we brought in the most significant changes to Scott Morrison's Stage 3 tax cuts to ensure that people who weren't just on the highest income brackets actually got to benefit from a significant reduction in tax cuts. We made them fairer, and I stand by that, and I think that was a really important policy. I'd also say that it's easy to swipe from the sidelines, but when you actually have a high inflationary environment, it's a very difficult economic problem to solve. How do you put more money into the economy, which potentially prolongs inflation, while also supporting people who are genuinely doing it tough, which we know are the lower and middle income earners in this country? That's why you've seen investments in targeted things like bringing down the cost of medicines, things like bringing down the cost of the PBS, including for menopause treatments, which was a new initiative by this government. How do we ensure that the costs of actually being able to access a doctor is covered by investing in bulk billing? Energy rebates that don't go to people, they go to actually reducing the amount of money you have to pay on an energy bill, which is directly trying to bring down the inflationary aspect of energy prices. When you look at investments in childcare, investments in education, trying to change student debt so that there's the interest accrued is actually much, much lower, forgiving a range of student debt, all of that has been designed to help people get through high inflationary environment. It has been really, really hard, but it's also so easy to just simplify this and dismiss it. Economics on this level is very, very difficult. But I believe that we are now seeing the worst of the inflationary environment, providing the tariffs that we've seen overseas are managed carefully. I do believe that the forecasts for the later half of the year will provide further relief, and there will be further economic growth in this country. But we can't just stop there. We also need to invest in the services that people rely on, and to ensure that people can actually get by, and to help accumulate and access assets over the long term. Rating your superannuation is not the answer for housing. Ensuring people can get into the housing market with a reduced deposit is the answer to helping people get into the housing market. And making sure that we in this country are actually supporting people into the long term by ensuring that debt is not too high when they leave university is a major step that we can help take the reduction of payments and the pressures of cost of living as well. The final thing I want to mention before I sort of wrap this up is around the groceries and the work that we've done around the ACCC to put downwards pressure on some of the major supermarkets. That has been a real pressure for families. And so we are increasing fines. We're also working with the ACCC to ensure that there's no price gouging as well at supermarkets. That is a huge cost for families, and we don't want people to be making the decision of can they afford to provide healthy, nutritious food or not for their families. That's some of the work, and there's a lot more to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Sonia.
Thanks, Josh. Since we're talking about bringing money into the economy, I'm going to start right up front by talking about the Greens, that one of our key platforms is to tax the 1 in 3 corporations who are avoiding tax and the billionaires. and close loopholes around the PRRT to bring money back into the economy to pay for the services we need. And it matters more than ever that we have this redistributive approach to the economy, because, as we all know, things are incredibly difficult when we've been out door knocking. Some of the conversations I find myself in are with parents who are wondering things like, you know, how many mental health care appointments can I afford to have for my child, and will the challenge that they face be fixed in the amount that I can afford? And it's not a question I want anyone to have to ask themselves, let alone is $18 too much for a block of cheese. So as far as we're concerned, we think fixing these crises will take more than just Band-Aid solutions, and housing, I think, is a really good example of where that comes in. So, for example, in 2019, Jim Chalmers himself said that if you don't do anything meaningful about negative gearing and the capital gains tax, you're not doing anything meaningful about housing affordability in this country, and we agree. We think that continuing to give $176 billion in tax handouts to property investors through negative gearing and capital gains tax is no longer a sustainable expenditure, and that's an extraordinary amount of money that we could put back into funding housing, for example. As I've been out door knocking, I find time and again there's broad support for this as a change, and everybody understands that if it's not you, it will be your children or your grandchildren who will need to benefit from this courageous act. We want to put that on the table and discuss it with the next Labor government, alongside these other measures that give renters and first home buyers a chance. So phase out capital gains tax and negative gearing for people with more than one investment property, just to be very clear. We want to look after mum and dad investors. I live above my landlady and I'm her superannuation, and we want to take care of people like that. But anyone who has beyond that an investment portfolio, we'd like to grandfather out those taxes, those tax benefits rather, and we'd like to get the government back into the business of building houses so we can use that saved expenditure we've proposed a public developer building homes that people can actually afford. We've had the Parliamentary Budget Office cost out 610,000 homes, a mix of public, social and rent-to-buy housing, and just to bring the pressure off the market from the bottom up at prices people can afford. We estimate that your average home buyer in that program would save around $250,000, which is not a small amount, and the government has built housing before, as we know, after the war, and we think it's time to get back into the business again. The third measure we'd like to see is, like we did during COVID when National Cabinet was applied to keep rents stable, we'd like to have a cap on unlimited rent increases for a period of time. Rents have gone up staggeringly. I've door-knocked people who are moving out because they had a 64% rent increase.
Okay. So topic number 3, healthcare. And we're going to start with Josh. But finding a bulk billing doctor is hard. Getting an appointment with a GP can be a struggle. Subsidised counselling sessions have been cut back and mental health services have long wait lists. What have you heard from voters and what are you advocating? Again, 3 minutes.
Thank you, Bernadine. I mean, this is one of the big challenges that we inherited in coming into government. You had bulk billing rates declining significantly. How do you turn that around? And so one of the things that we've done is already increase the bulk billing incentives for concession card holders and a few other different special categories of people. We've seen those categories of people have access to higher rates of bulk billing. We now want to do that for the rest of the health system. Now, around here, the number of bulk billing clinics is declining. We need to turn that around, and that's by ensuring that the rebates are increased, but also the incentives for GPs is increased as well. The other thing is to actually have access to Medicare urgent care clinics. As I said in the opening remarks, we set up one in the Alfred, which has had over 20,000 appointments since it's been set up in the last 24 months. And 20,000 appointments of people being able to access a high-quality health service. Actually, if you walk into the Alfred and you don't need to go into the emergency department, because of that urgent care clinic, you get triaged to go and see your GP. Now, that takes a bit of pressure off the emergency department as well. The other aspect is how do we ensure that people have access to high-quality healthcare in mental health. I mentioned South Melbourne's Headspace services, but also we're expanding those services to make sure that there's more psychologists and more ability to actually treat acute mental health services. Now, I know there's been a lot of commentary around the 10 mental health services and 20, and I've actually spoken out about it at the time where I was quite concerned about that policy change. I'm actually far more supportive of the way in which we're proposing to change things right now, because there is a missing middle of people, and let me explain. If you need to go and get access to a mental health service, most people have significant changes and significant improvement after about 4 to 6 sessions. And that covers about 80% of people who are using the Medicare services. It's the other people who have more acute or more severe mental health services that require extra treatment, extra specialty, extra access to psychologists, psychiatrists, and all of the wraparound services. That's what the Headspace capacity is all about, but also the Medicare urgent care mental health clinics that we're setting up. There'll be one in Glen Iris, which will be the closest one that we're setting up here in St Kilda, and people will be able to go and access mental health services, not just for the usual things that people need, but any other mental health services as well. And Medicare is a fundamental thing that the Labor Party helped establish in this country. We have to turn it around. Universal healthcare is not something that we can just turn our back on. The way we do that is by working diligently and providing the resources for our healthcare sector so that the healthcare workers, doctors, nurses, incredible people in our healthcare services actually have the resources and the funding and the ability to provide free, high-quality healthcare in Australia. And that's what we're focused on fixing as well. Thank you.
Sonia?
Thank you. Yeah, people are making really tough decisions about healthcare, as I said before, and it's certainly not an area where you want to wonder to yourself whether or not you can afford to go and get something checked and delay action. So you may have heard us say, why does Medicare stop at your neck, which is perhaps one of the highlight key policies that we'd like to introduce, which is to bring dental and mental health care under Medicare and to make it universal and free for people to access. So we'd also like to make it free to see the GP. I know I pay about $80 or $90 just to go to an appointment, even with a Medicare rebate. And we'd like to bring that right down by a $21 billion investment to boost the triple bulk billing incentives and raise Medicare rebates for longer appointments. We'd also like to undertake an investment in public hospitals by having a 50-50 split funding between federal and the states to invest $30 billion across public hospitals, cutting wait lists and just improving services there. And my favourite thing, we'd really like to build 1,000 healthcare clinics across the country, and 6 of them right here in Macnamara, which provide genuinely free GPs, give people access to dentists, nurses and mental health professionals, with a $31.7 billion investment to set up those places. I know here in Macnamara there's only about 6 bulk billing places, and only 3 of them that are sort of bulk billing beyond the age of 16. And it's really difficult to get an appointment. You spend half the day waiting around. So we would like to build those 6 clinics across the electorate to make healthcare genuinely free for everybody, and expand the list of mental health professionals, removing session limits and increasing rebates in those facilities. So that we also think it's really valuable to employ an extra 1,000 additional peer workers across the mental health sector as well, to make sure that there's enough people to provide those appointments. So mental health care, it matters. I finished early.
Thanks, Benson.
So under a coalition, we're going to invest $9.4 billion into health, and that means boosting our bulk billing. And we have actually seen this decline under Labor from 88% under a coalition to 77%. It is harder, and it is costing more to access healthcare services. It will also mean investing into hospitals, especially into areas that are growth areas. Obviously, investing here in Macnamara is critical. But another critical aspect of this, in regards to the wait lists and the bottlenecks that we're seeing in that pipeline to access healthcare, is the impact on the less and less numbers of GPs. So we'll be incentivising junior doctors to work as GPs. So that will directly address some of the shortages that we're seeing in our local clinics. We're also guaranteeing cheaper medicines and lowering the PBS co-payment to 25%. On top of that, we're going to be investing $500 million into women's health, and also doubling the subsidised mental health sessions from 10 to 20, which is a critical need. And we'll be making that permanent. It won't be a temporary solution, which it was under previous governments, and what we've seen under Labor. We'll be doubling it permanently, so people that do need help can get help and can get the support that they actually need. we'll be committing an additional $900 million to support mental health more broadly, with $500 million increase into mental health sessions, as well as $400 million plan to deliver the world-leading focus on youth mental health. And as I mentioned earlier, when I was the Australian Youth Rep, mental health was one of the key issues that was impacting young people right across the board. And so that's why expanding the National Centre of Excellence on Youth Mental Health is absolutely critical. And that was actually created by Peter Dutton when he was the Minister for Health. So expanding on the work that we've already done, ensuring that people can access the services that they need is absolutely critical, and then lowering the costs that it will that impacts your hip pockets when you go and see a GP or a doctor. So that's something that we'll commit to, and that's something that we're actually going to be delivering, and that's $9.4 billion into healthcare.
Thank you. Now we have Speaker's Choice. Yes, that's next. So this is your chance to go a little bit in more depth about an issue you're most passionate about. So each candidate, again, will have 3 minutes, with the bell at 10 seconds as well. Would you prefer to come up here, or would you like to stay seated? Stay seated. All right, then. So, Sonia, you're up first.
Excellent.
Then, Benson.
In shock news, the Greens going to talk about climate and environment. Woo! I know. So incredibly to me, actually, of all of the topics that comes up on doors, most of all on the 85,000 doors that we've knocked, climate and environment is still the number one issue in general across the electorate. It varies a little bit depending on where you are. And I think that's because when I reflect on it, we're a very climate-aware outdoor community. We live in relationship with the lake and the bay, and if you live near the Elwood Canal, you have a strong sense of what flooding might look like. And also, if you are in a region that's prone to coastal inundation, there's about 16,500 homes that are at high risk of coastal inundation in the case of flood or sea level rise, then your insurance may have gone up rather substantially. And so climate is something that's on people's mind. And so I wanted to talk about that because Australia, of course, is not meeting its global goals to hit its climate targets anywhere near. And in the last electoral cycle, we saw the Labor government approve over 30 new coal and gas projects. And, of course, Dutton wants more. In worse news, our environment laws are weaker now than they were under Morrison. And if you're wondering why it is that this happens, then I would like to remind us that both of the major parties take campaign donations from coal and gas corporations. And this is why we saw, for example, with the EPBC laws just the other week, at the end of the last sitting year, that was shelved when the coal company made a phone call to the WA Premier, who made a phone call to the Environment Minister, who made a phone call to the Prime Minister, who scuttled the EPBC laws. And so we have a bolder approach. You might guess that I would also like to raise an example that comes up on doors a little bit that I am delighted is getting cut through. If I say to you Norway's sovereign wealth fund, do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, see, there's a lot of nods, right? So Norway tax their fossil fuel exports at about 79%. And as a result, they have $1 trillion in sovereign wealth fund, which they're able to spend on services for people. Here in Australia, our tax is closer to sort of 11%, depending on where and what. And as a result, we don't have that funding. Plus, in addition, of course, we spend about $1 billion every month on subsidising coal and gas projects. So in staggering news, the Greens would propose not to give subsidies to coal and gas, and also to close loopholes around the PRRT, to tax export of fossil fuel more courageously, tax it like Norway, as we say, and no new coal and gas approvals, and use that money instead to fund the services that we need around health and all the other things we're talking about now, and save koalas.
Thank you, Sonia.
So the topic that I wanted to touch on was around small business and the importance of small business, not only in Macnamara but across the country. My background, I was in banking for a long time, and I was an assistant manager in business banking when I was the age of 19. And so I actually started working in business banking on the tail end of the GFC. And so we shepherded a lot of businesses through a really precarious time in our economy. And what we're seeing currently, right across the country, is record high insolvencies. And when I think about what that actually means, is that when we walk along Carlisle Street, when we walk along Fitzroy Street and Ackland Street, we're seeing shop after shop up for lease or vacant. And that's not only impacting people's lives and communities, but it actually directly impacts those entrepreneurs that have put themselves out there on a limb and back themselves to run their own business. We know that small business is the largest employer in Australia. So when we hear figures like over 50,000 businesses going insolvent over a 2-year period, and they employ on an average between 2 to 5 people, that is a significant number of people that are suddenly thrust into a very precarious financial position. When we've seen prices that have gone up, energy prices particularly, by 32.3% across the country, really putting a stranglehold on businesses that, for any business owner, would know that cash flow is king, and being able to plan and being able to prepare and being able to deploy resources in regards to their forward projections. It's really critical that they understand what the outlook on the economy looks like. And unfortunately, under this current government, we've really seen businesses up against the wall and suffering. About 6 months ago, I was actually in Clarendon Street. I met a guy named Sanjay who just opened up a business. He'd been running it for about 3 months. And he said, "Look, Benson, I'm really, really concerned." He said, "I've invested into bringing this business to life. It was a part of a franchise." And he said, "I just don't know if I'll be able to be here in 6 months' time." And he cited the costs of bills, the cost of taxes that were impacting his business, but then also the lack of foot traffic. And that's a broader cost of living issue that's really impacting streets like Clarendon Street, like Bay Street, like Ackland Street, like Fitzroy Street, and the list goes on. Because as you walk around and you're seeing businesses that are suffering, it means that the whole community is suffering. People are less likely to come out, less vibrant. We need to be able to back small business. We need to be able to bring business back into our communities, and they are the ultimate driver of employers out there, but it's also the backing innovation. And my time in the US as a trade and investment commissioner was to support Australian innovators and entrepreneurs to be able to expand and break into the US. So we are a country of innovators and entrepreneurs, and we need to back small business because right now they are suffering.
Thank you, Benson. Okay, so now is the time that you've all been... Oh. Sorry, Josh.
I really appreciate everyone who rose their voice there. I feel the solidarity. All right. Well, you've all chosen to be here in St Kilda instead of watching the leaders' debate tonight, so I figured we'd talk about something local, and also, it gives me heart palpitations thinking about the leaders' debate, so we'll just move on. We'll go forwards. I thought I'd talk about the commitments that we've made locally and what it actually means as the member for Macnamara, of why I've chosen some of the different organisations to help them thrive and move forward in the next stage. The first commitment that we've made is just down the road in Windsor. The Windsor Community Childcare Centre Community Children's Centre is an organisation that is community run. The land's owned by Swinburne University, and Swinburne are looking to sell that land. Now, why am I telling you this story? Is because access to that local centre is absolutely crucial. It's run by the community, and it's an asset that helps provide high quality early education for young people in that community. And so we've decided to partner with the City of Stonington to actually help save the Windsor Community Children's Centre. Now that happens when you can... Thank you. That happens when you can partner with state government, when you can work with local government, when you can... I've sat in meetings after meeting with Swinburne University as well. Now that commitment was a difficult one to navigate through, but it's important. The other one is Joy Media, operating out of the Pride Centre. It's the only LGBTIQA+ mouthpiece and radio station anywhere across Australia. We're going to fund it. It's not that much money, but it makes a big difference to an organisation like Joy, of $250,000, so that there is a strong and proud voice representing that community. just down the road, the Port Phillip Eco Centre is an organisation that is filled with people in our community who care about the environment and who want to do something meaningful and tangible. We're going to stack it full of all of the equipment you need for citizen science, engagement, community experiment, community work, and all of the things that are going to be used by people in our community. Now, that organisation matters, and I'm proud to be supporting them to make sure that that incredible new site is going to be filled with all the equipment that all of you need to participate in all of the work that the Eco Centre is doing. Yeah, here. Last one I wanted to mention was the Australian National Academy of Music. Yeah. Now, I don't know if any of you have sat through one of the concerts of ANAM at the Recital Centre or at the South Melbourne Town Hall, but wow. You know, this is a talent of musical capability that is only going to be there if we harvest it and invest in it. And we've committed $25 million to redo the South Melbourne Town Hall so that it is home here in Macnamara, and that we can all go there and enjoy the incredible talent of Australian musicians and Australian artists. Now, all of these different little groups and all of the, here. All of these different little groups matter, and having a seat at the table matters, and I'm proud to support all of them and more. And that's why we need to keep investing in our community, and these are just some examples that I'm really, really proud of. Thank you.
Apologies again for cutting you short.
But, no, that's fine, it's fine.
Take two,
Yeah.
and now is the time you've all been waiting for, and that is audience questions. Our aim is to get as many questions as possible on a wide variety of issues. So we have a couple of microphones. I would like you to form a line up the centre here, and I have microphone marshals, Catherine and Serge, ready. And if you want to ask a question, please tell them. Yes? You want to do that first up? Okay, so we're just going to get a bit of organisation because there's quite a lot of questions here. Hands up who's got a question on climate? There's a couple down the end. Who's got a question on the Middle East? One down the end. Who's got a question on refugees? Who's got a question on housing? All right, so maybe we'll just take it one at a time, please. But while you're organising everyone there, Catherine, I've got Greg Day from TWiSK. Have you got a microphone there, Greg?
Yes, I have. So,
when you've answered candidates, can you pass the microphone to the next candidate? We'll start off with Josh.
so what we're doing here, candidates, is we've got 10 impertinent questions that we'd like you to answer in just a couple of words, and we're going to get you all to each answer the same question. So answer it and pass it to the next person, please. So the first question, I'm Greg Day, I'm from TWiSK, by the way. Yeah, thanks for that. So candidates, what was the last loaf of bread you purchased and how much did it cost?
Yeah.
Snappy.
I purchased some bagels and they were a few dollars each. Yeah.
This morning I bought my children Cheesy Mite Scrolls and they're about $2 each, I think.
I bought my wife gluten-free bread and it cost $10.99. Yeah.
Okay, so starting again with Josh. When cooking at home, what is your signature dish?
I make a good vegan falafel and also good vegan souvlaki. Homemade pita as well. It's a bit of a party trick, yeah.
I am notoriously diabolical in the kitchen. I can boil a kettle and an egg, and we wouldn't call it a signature.
My dad taught me a fish curry with coconut milk and spinach, and it's actually beautiful. So I'm not as good as my dad, but it comes a little bit close.
Okay, this time we'll start off with Benson. What household chore do you avoid the most, and which chore uses your personal superpower?
Great question. I avoid taking the bins down. I've got 3 little kids, 2 that are still using nappies, and I should take them down more frequently, but I try to avoid it when I can. And the one that uses my superpower is I love play. And so it's not really a chore, but really after a long day when my son needs to get energy out, we play, we wrestle, and have a bit of fun. And that's part of my superpower.
That's cute. I like that. I avoid watering the plants. I don't know how to love them to health, either over or underwater, and especially all the ferns, very bad. My superpower is actually collecting golden retriever fur on my person. So, yeah, some days I could make a whole second dog out of just what's on me.
Vacuuming isn't great. I actually got one of those sort of automatic ones, and I've named it Brian, and it does a wonderful job, Brian. And the things that I love doing, things that use my superpower, I'm good at carrying things, Greg, so I can carry the bins and carry stuff, yeah. Don't do that too badly. I've been told I'm a bit of an orc. Anyway, that's a story for another day.
Okay, we'll start this one with Sonia. What was the first concert that you attended?
Oh, this is such a good one. I saw over at the Palais before it burned down. The Palace. What wasn't the Palais next to it? Palace. But the Palace. Oh, okay. I went and saw Dinosaur Jr. Thank you. And I'm pretty sure there was a driver's license with a little bit of liquid paper on it.
Okay, Benson.
I was actually in grade 3. I grew up in country New South Wales, and there's this thing called the Crocker Stedford, and it was bringing together all Aboriginal bands. And on the back of a flatbed truck, Yothi Indy played. Yeah, it comes with a bit of cred.
I can't beat that one. That's pretty good. The first concert for my 18th birthday, my friends bought me tickets to Michael Franti and Spearhead at the Prince of Wales. So he played 3 hours acoustic guitar and absolutely was rocked it that night. Yeah, it's pretty good.
That's fantastic. So, Josh, what was your dream job when you were in primary school?
I wanted to play basketball in the NBA, and I very quickly realised I was not going to play basketball in the NBA. Yeah.
I think I probably wanted to be a minister because my dad preached in church. So could we say I wanted to be a minister?
Benson?
That was 2. That was mine as well, but very similar. Yeah, but the other one was play rugby for the Wallabies, and I played a bit of schoolboy, did tour of New Zealand and played against South Africa and Japan, but I stopped growing at the age of 18, and everyone got bigger than me.
Okay, now, Josh, what was the last book you read?
Great question. It was called the exact name. I'm having a complete blank, but it was a story about a father and a son, and it was in God's Day, I think it was called, Greg. It was sort of a journey of a father's life, and yeah, it was a pretty powerful book. Yeah.
So partly read, partly audio booked Techno-Feudalism by Yanis Varoufakis, which is quite a tome. Yep, and like a sign of the terrible times that we're in. Am I right? So yeah.
Again, 3 kids under 5. It was, yeah. Well, there was a bluey one but the one that comes to mind is, it was a story about how our God gives everyone gifts, and it's around finding what your gift is by testing and trying things, and actually challenging yourself and being courageous.
Okay, now I've run out of time, so this is my last question. Do you still carry cash?
No, I haven't carried cash for a while. No, just tap on the phone, Greg.
I am a one-woman cash economy, right? My children get money from their grandmother and today, Easter, apparently, is a time to send money to your grandchildren. And so I am the person that takes the cash and then puts the money in the bank account. So you should rob me after the show, yeah.
I don't carry cash too often, but we're trying to teach my daughter how to save at the moment, and this came from my work in microfinance, the best way to teach good saving habits is to have a glass jar and for them to put coins into it, because it's physical, it's visual, and it's an automatic kind of hit of endorphin when you can fill it up.
Okay, well that's all
Thanks,
from me,
Greg.
so
Well
thank
done,
you
Greg.
for your tolerance.
Well, that was fun. So before we start with the audience questions, and I know you're waiting there very eagerly, if we can't get to every question that we have tonight, email them to Greg and he will publish them on TWiSK with the candidate's response over the next week or so. Okay, so Catherine, we've got our first question, and candidates, less than 1 minute answers please, and stop when you hear the bell.
Given the recent betrayals to my community, the disability community, by both the major parties on issues like gutting the NDIS and ignoring the DRC recommendations on marriage equality, forced sterilisations and wage discrimination, why should my community ever vote for the two major parties again? And I would like to remind you, we do make up 30% of the vote in Australia.
Start with you, Josh.
Yeah, thanks for the question. The NDIS is an absolutely essential part of Australian government landscape now, and the Gillard government helped create it. I understand that there has been a whole lot of commentary around how the NDIS is operating. You know, my office is constantly working with people to ensure that their plans are maintained or expanded, and we are still continuing to grow the NDIS. You know, we've brought it down from 14% growth to about 8% growth annually. So it's still growing, and it's still so important. If there are any instances where people are not getting access to the NDIS in the way in which they feel they should be, then please come and see my team, because this is something we deal with often, but often it's the case that there are actually things that can be done to help people, and we are constantly working to try and ensure that people access the NDIS, because it is saving lives and it's such an important part of the Australian government's work.
Thank you, Benson.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the NDIS is something that we all should be very proud of, and it was really set up to ensure that the most vulnerable people have power and agency to be able to direct the services and support that they absolutely need. So to be able to continue that is also really critical under a coalition government. Look, it is really important that we are creating an inclusive and welcoming community for people with disabilities, and that starts with increasing visibility as well. So, you know, the work that you do in regards to the leadership work that you do within the Greens Party, but also outside of that, is really critical. So, you know, we need to do more of that, we need to see more of that, and we need to invest in, you know, the critical services that is the NDIS, to ensure people that are vulnerable, that have disabilities, are getting the support that they actually need and have a voice to advocate back up to government.
Will you both bloody cut the NDIS?
Thank you. Please, no, otherwise you'll have to... Can we please move on to Sonia? Thank you.
I'm incredibly proud of Jordan Steele-John, who is the first disabled man to go into the Parliament. They had to widen the door frames to get him through that door. I'm incredibly proud of his voice in advocacy, and I'm proud of his plan to restore funding to the NDIS and to all of the services that have been cut by the major parties, and to provide a system that takes care of people the way that it should, and the way that we as a wealthy country can afford to do so, to give dignity and access and equality to everybody in this country. Yep.
Thank you. Thanks, Catherine.
Hi, this is a question for Josh.
Sure.
You're running on an open ticket. At the Caulfield Jewish Community Forum, you said the last thing you wanted to see was to see the Greens get elected in Macnamara, but at the Refugee Forum, you said something similar about the Liberals. Can you tell us what you really think?
So I'm running in this election to win, right? I'm running in this election to be a part of a majority Labor government. And thank you. A couple of friends in the audience. There has been a lot of talk about the preferences. The Greens have said we did a deal with the Liberal Party. The Liberal Party said we should put the Greens last. Whatever. It's a bit of politics. No one can tell you who to preference whoever you want. When I come up in conversations on the doors, I've had hundreds, thousands of conversations with people in our community. You know what doesn't come up is preferences. People talk about themselves, their community, the future of this country, policies that affect the future of our country. No one's talking about who you're preferencing, who you don't. That's your decision. You can preference whoever you like. Now, I'm asking you to vote Labor and then preference whoever you want, whoever you feel you want to preference. But this election is more important than just preferences. We've run an open ticket because it's your decision. What we're asking you is to elect a government that's going to help build a better future for this country.
Thank you. Next question.
Mine is to the three candidates. Last year, my spirit was broken, and the majority of our First Nations people's spirits was broken by a no vote. Since that time, the Labor government has said, well, we'll do some more things. I haven't heard from the Greens, and the Liberal Party is saying we won't have 3 flags.
Can you get to your question, please?
Yeah, okay. I want to know what you're going to do about the fallout for the First Nations people since the referendum.
Okay, thank you. That's more than 30 seconds. Well done.
And no welcome to country and no flags. That's all.
Thank you, Benson.
No worries. Well, firstly, it was heartbreaking. I agree with you. My mum was 10 years old before she was classed a citizen in her own country as well, when over 90% of Australians voted in favour. My personal belief is that if we had taken 2 questions to the people, we would have seen over 90% of people back a preamble acknowledging Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders as the first Australians, which was and is historical fact. It was actually the voice mechanism which was challenging. I was appointed under Ken White, first Indigenous person to be a member of Indigenous Australians, to actually look at what that mechanism looks like. And it was incredibly challenging to acknowledge the existing governance structures and our native title, our lands title, our native title, and also our lands councils, as well as our community-controlled health organisations, in regards to how do they actually advocate a single voice into government. So it was incredibly challenging. I'll come to that in a moment. And it was incredibly disappointing to wake up on the Monday morning after the referendum and hear complete silence from the Labor government. Now they are talking about economic empowerment. They don't have an economic empowerment bone in their body, and that's something that I'm passionate about, because right now, Indigenous businesses...
Thank you, Benson. Go to Sonia next.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd like to acknowledge that the Voice referendum was a deeply difficult time and an awful experience for the First Nations community. And I'd also like to say that it was a perfect example of how, in the absence of positive information and a story, fear and misinformation thrived. And I want to say, with due respect, that the Dutton government played into that fear and misinformation and was at the absolute heart of that campaign, which was awful and painful to see. So the Greens would like to reintroduce a bill in Parliament later this year for Australia's first Federal Truth and Justice Commission. And to my mind, that is a very important bill, because I think that the fear and the misinformation spread in the absence of this truth and this truth-telling process that needs to happen. And the story of who we are truthfully as a nation, to my mind, feels so central to every other challenge that we face as a community, and it must be a process that we all go on together. So that bill we'll put in the Parliament later this year.
Thank you.
The first thing I would say is that politics is often a very difficult business, and I know, Benson, this is deeply personal for you, and I just want to acknowledge that this is not something that we should just be flippant about. In Macnamara we had 1,000 people campaigning for the Voice across all political aisles, and we got one of the highest votes in the country, and we platform amazing First Nations people who are pushing forward for this, and I was proud of every single person who contributed to this. And democracy is hard, and sometimes we need to accept the outcomes. I do absolutely believe, and this is nothing to do with Benson, is that the responsibility of running a significant ongoing campaign by Peter Dutton had a significant effect in placing doubt into the Australian people, and it's just devastating, because it didn't need to be that way. It didn't need to be that way.
Thank you, Josh. Next question, no preamble, please.
I've got a question for all 3 candidates. For those of you that were either born overseas or have parents born overseas, what's your status under Section 44 of the Constitution?
So I'll just do it quickly. Yeah. My father's born in Papua New Guinea. You don't get citizenship by descent at all, so we've already had immigration lawyers review that just in case, but we already knew it was safe. But good question, because it did come up at the last election.
Yes, my parents were born in the Netherlands, and they came out here in the 50s with all those other groups that came out on the boats, and they were naturalised when they arrived. So I, thank goodness, do not have a Section 44 issue, but that is a very topical question for a Green this week. Yeah, thank you for asking.
2 points to make. I had to relinquish my British citizenship, but the bigger point, I think, with Section 44 is that there's probably 3 or 4 things in our Constitution, including the length of terms, because government shouldn't just be constant election cycles, that if there was a Prime Minister and opposition leader who could sit down and say, look, let's just do this together and actually tidy up and modernise some aspects of our democracy, I think that would be a significant thing, and Section 44 has to be a part of it. I mean, how ridiculous that you can serve in the Victorian Parliament, but you can't serve in the Federal Parliament. No one's questioning your loyalty to this country. So I'd like to see a few constitutional reforms, but given how difficult it's been to get referendums up, it has to be done in a bipartisan or multi-partisan way, and I'd like to see that. I think it'd be the interests of our country.
Next question.
This is directed at the Greens. Talking about dignity, what would your plans be to improve aged care?
Oh, that's a good question. I feel like I want to take it on notice and get back to you in more detail, or I'll have to flip through my flip book. But I will say that in general, we wish to tax the 1 in 3 corporations that avoid tax to pay for services we need, which include the aged care sector. I'm of the view that privatisation of the aged care sector has been a terrible failure of care for the individuals in it. My mum has just entered aged care, so I can speak from personal experience, and that we saw in the pandemic what an absolute nightmare outcome that was for individuals. So if you would like to give me an email address, I will send you policy specifics. Yep.
Thank you. Mary.
Could I just quickly have a... Do you mind if I respond to that as well? I know it was directed to Sonia, but we know that we have an ageing population, and we call it this social infrastructure gap. So we've got ageing infrastructure and ageing population, which is going to peak in about 7 years, and we don't have the appropriate infrastructure or resources to be able to cater for the growing demand. And so greater investment actually needs to be made into that workforce, and targeted immigration is really important there. But also building the skill sets, and then also building the appropriate infrastructure. And I'm talking about aged care facilities as well as retirement villages, but keeping them in places that people that have built their lives around can remain and age well in place. Okay. A good example is at Australian Unity. They've got a place in South Melbourne. People that have moved there have lived in South Melbourne, have built a community. They don't want to leave there to be isolated elsewhere. So it's a really critical piece, and we're going to feel the pressure of this in the next 5 to 7 years when we are seeing more people moving into retirement and aged care facilities, and we haven't invested in what we need to at this stage.
Thank you, Benson. We'll also hear from Josh, to be fair.
I just make the point that there's been a number of policies that we've tried to increase the standards in residential aged care. Obviously, having nurses on any residential aged care is so important, but it's not just residential aged care, it's also home aged care as well, and there are a whole range of services where, frankly, it's a constant challenge. We've just in the City of Port Phillip have had a reduction in the provision of services in the City of Port Phillip, which is, frankly, not something I thought was a particularly wise move by the City of Port Phillip. I understand their difficulties in service provision, but it just shows how important it is that people have access to services. I'd make 2 points about Benson's comments. One of the ways in which you ensure that there is a workforce is providing skills and training. Free TAFE is a really important part of that, and the Liberals want to cut it, which boggles my mind. But anyway, let's put that aside. As well as the increases in payment and wages for aged care staff. These are hard-working people. And again, that our submission to the Fair Work Commission to increase the wages of aged care workers was opposed by Peter Dutton, which is a shameful act.
Thank you.
My question is for Benson. Benson, can you explain to me and everybody here in this electorate and outside it why the Liberal Party is channeling its preferences to Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party?
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Well, thanks for the question. And look, the reality is, the Liberal Party is a centre-right party. The Pauline Hanson One Nation is a centre-right party as well in the Australian landscape. And right now, and as you've seen, we actually have. No, I won't go down that path. But we do. We are standing with our preferences on our ticket. Is the Libertarians, One Nation, the Labor Party, and an independent, and then also Greens. So out of the selection that we have here, we are directing preferences to the One Nation Party, and there's elements there that I personally feel challenged about, and I can openly say that. But at the end of the day, in being able to work with values-aligned parties and people, then it's important that we actually, direct our preferences and work with parties that we believe that we can get policy through together.
Thank you. Next question.
I guess this is a follow-up to what was just asked there.
Bernadine, can we just move to 30-second answers too?
Okay, yes,
Yep.
30-second answers, candidates.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm a believer that how a person chooses to number their ballot paper is an expression of their own values. So we may understand, your values better. Tell us how you, as individuals, will be numbering your ballot papers when you're...
Josh?
I genuinely understand why you'd ask that question, and that's a legitimate question. But let me also tell you something that's really important in this country. Private democracy, private choice of your own ballot is something that belongs to you and not anyone else. And that privacy should not be jeopardised. And I know we're public figures, but I'm sorry, that actually is a principle that I really believe in.
Okay. Sonia?
You can tell by the way that I've put the preferences on my ballot that I look forward to going to Parliament to work with the next Labor government in a minority Parliament, and I welcome that outcome.
Benson?
Well, on my ballot, we've put the Greens last because what I believe, a Labor minority government will end up impacting this nation, not only in the next term, but actually for the future. It will end up costing people more, will put our nation at risk, and unfortunately it won't get the work done and the heavy lifting that we need to do in regards to this economy. So we are putting the Greens last.
Next question, please.
My question's for all three candidates. Can you please advise your solution to ensure that there's going to be energy for Victoria when especially the Ulang power plant closes? My concern is that it's a fact that renewables in the pipeline and in construction are not enough to power Victoria into the future.
Benson?
Yeah, look, you're right, and this is the concern. When the projections for Melbourne that we are going to be the size of London by 2050, we need to get the right mix of energy. And right now, the energy grid is made up of about 40% renewables. We are looking to increase that to about 58%, but we are also looking to establish an East Coast reservation of gas. We are sitting on a natural resource which has been, for the last 20 years, a critical energy provider for the transition that needs to take place, and we are very much committed to net zero by 2050, and ensuring that nuclear is part of that mix. But it has to be a balanced, it has to be a responsible transition.
Thank you. We'll go to Josh now, please.
Not take an ideological approach to this.
So we don't have. Well, I'm not sure who asked the question. I'm not sure which is going. Sorry, how are you going? Yeah, how are you going? Thanks for the question. We don't have a Victorian energy grid. We have a national energy grid, which sometimes means that Victoria is an energy importer and sometimes we're an exporter, depending on it. It is true to say that our coal-fired power stations over the next decade are going to be replaced and are going to come off the grid. So what is there to replace it? We've outlined an energy plan that increases renewables up to 80%, which is not 100%, but we think that we can get there over the next few years by 2028. This is done in conjunction with the engineers at AEMO, and the lights haven't gone off and they can't go off because we're going to do this responsibly.
Thank you, Sonia.
Well, we have an absolute abundance of resources in this country, and we would like to see more gas retained for domestic use. We send obviously 75% or so of our gas overseas, which leaves none of it here for us, and thus our gas bills are extraordinarily high. We would like to make sure that we can retain more gas for domestic use and also push toward renewables as fast as that is able to be moved.
Thank you. Next question.
Question for Josh. Your re-election campaign materials are paid for by our taxpayer dollars. I know this because I saw that they are authorised by your electorate office, that's your placards and cards for door knocking. How do you justify to your constituents like me, who are in the room today, that you're using their money to bankroll your own re-election campaign, rather than things that your constituents need?
Yeah. We use that authorisation on all of our accounts, but we've privately fundraised, including for our campaign office, and all of the election material is done through election fundraising, and there's specific rules what you can and can't use. So there are some things that you can use for your electoral allowance to communicate with the electorate, like if you've got an invitation to Anzac Day and a few other things, that can be, but most of the material that you've seen, all the online advertising, is done through fundraising. Thanks for the question.
Hugo.
Bernadine. A good local issue, Albert Park Reserve. Victoria's biggest community sports precinct surrounding Victoria's most famous lake, but critically underfunded, in poor condition, run over by the Grand Prix every year. What will each of you commit to doing to improve Albert Park Reserve and for the thousands of people in Macnamara that use it?
We'll start with you, Josh.
If anyone doesn't know, Hugo puts so much work into Albert Park and is one of those amazing community people who actually have been advocating not just for his own club, but so many others. We had a $5 million commitment that has been distributed as a needs-based. We're improving lighting, change rooms for female change rooms. No girl should be walking into a room with a urinal, for goodness sake. There's upgrades to a lot of the parks. The baseball pitch was the first one completed. We're going to improve the sailing entrance for Albert Park College. That's all part of it, but the bigger picture as well has to be done in collaboration with the state government, who are the primary ones responsible for this. I know there's a lot of talk about the potential pit lane, but the community needs to have benefit from that investment.
Thank you. Sonia?
Thank you, Hugo. As you know, I love the park and my kids use it for sport, and we take my dog there all the time. We've put a commitment on the table of $10 million to rehabilitate the park and the lake. The lake at the moment, in case you don't know, if you've been there, you might have seen, is suffering from an outbreak of botulism, which has killed in the vicinity of 200 or 300 of the birds. In fact, when I was there, we spotted a dead coot floating in the water. The lake needs our care if it's to be available for this generation and the next, and we've made that commitment. Yep.
Benson.
Yeah, thanks, Hugo. And Josh is right. Like, we need to actually work with Parks Victoria and put pressure on state government. In 2026, we'd hope to see a change of government at a state level, where we can actually do some real work with the Parks Department to ensure that it's actually upkept. There needs to be greater responsibility on council as well in regards to how do you actually support local clubs as well to get the upgrades that are actually needed. So there's a lot more work, and unfortunately it hasn't received the love that it needs to. And $5 million is a great investment into a great club, but it needs a significant amount more.
Okay, last question, and then we'll go to question only.
Yes, you all agreed that we're in a climate crisis, climate emergency. We've also got massive gas projects that are about to start across the country.
Question only,
What are you
please.
going to do to stop these massive projects?
Okay, we'll go to Sonia first.
As you know, the Greens would like to see no new approvals of new projects or expansion of projects, and to meet our global targets instead. And I think this is the most steadfast position that we have. If we're approaching a shared power parliament, it's certainly a position that I'd like to see on the table to form government. Yeah.
Thank you. Benson.
Thank you. Look, gas is actually going to enable us to transition, and it's transitioning our economy as well as our energy grid as well. So actually it is really critical. An important part that we're going to be taking is actually establishing the East Coast Reservation, and that's ensuring that there's more Australian gas staying on shore, keeping prices lower, but also recognising that there is a global market for gas demand. And we've got, right on our northern borders, the fastest growing demographic across Asia. So we've got the fastest growing OECD region. And so ensuring that they're also being able to make that transition, and gas being a critical part of that is important. So gas is going to enable us to get to 2050, as well as renewables and other areas.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Thanks for the question, Peter. We use gas to create steel and other, cement and bricks at the moment, but we need to try and find a replacement for that. That's why we're trying to build an industry from scratch in green hydrogen. And it's hard, but we're partnering with Denmark and Germany to try and get that off the ground. We also need to transition our economy away from fossil fuels. It's why we've approved 81 renewable energy projects to ensure that as we electrify our homes, as we electrify our cars, as we actually ensure that electricity and clean electricity is powering our country, that's the predominant use of it. And as we move away from gas, that's something that we really need to do as we head towards renewables. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, we're running out of time, so I'm going to ask for questions only, and the candidates can take them up later, and we'll also publish the answers on TWiSK. So, Catherine, question only, please. 30 seconds.
Josh, with respect to your answer before, you called the topic of preferences just politics. How do you not instead see your how to vote card as a matter of principle and an opportunity to speak for the future you want for this community, even if you yourself don't make it to the finish line? How is this not
Thank you very much. Next question.
Sorry, 1/3 of global greenhouse gas emissions are not from our fossil fuel industry, they're from animal agriculture. That is also the biggest contributor to deforestation, biodiversity loss, species extinction, and water
Questions, please.
What is your party doing to address a transition away from animal agriculture towards plant-based agriculture that affects all our planetary boundaries?
Thank you.
What are you going to do about the devastation being inflicted on Palestinians at the moment? And as a fellow Jew, Josh, do you feel like you've led like a righteous mensch in this moment?
Next question.
What is it that either any of you will do about the petroleum and rent resources tax to ensure that those people are paying their fair share?
Thank you. Next question.
Violence against women is quite high and no one's spoken about it. Just wondering, in this specific electorate, what are you guys going to do?
Thank you for your question.
What's my question? Benson, you were telling me that you're a Christian person, and then I saw you say on the internet the other day that you're a proud Zionist. And during a Holocaust, how can you... Yeah, during a Holocaust, how can you say you're a proud Zionist?
I'd like to answer that one directly, thank you.
You can answer that during your wrap-up. I'm sorry, Benson. Next question.
That's for the Greens representative. Do you condemn the decision by the Greens party to not to condemn destruction of the war memorials? Do you condemn Jean Leong, who said the Jews have the tentacles? None of them.
Thank you for your question. Next question, please.
We're in a housing crisis. We need more homes, and you all acknowledge that in your opening comments. I'm just curious, not how or by who, but how many homes and where specifically in Macnamara you want to see that housing supply.
Thank you.
There are many refugees on bridging visas who have been here up to 10 years and are not allowed to work. Three of you, what are their parties' reaction to this? Do you intend to assist these people or at least then review?
Thank you for your question. And our second last question.
Bulldozing trees, koala and glider habitat, all in the name of saving the environment. There's a project in Queensland that is going to generate 0.47% of electricity generation for Queensland when the wind blows, and we'll need a gas plant on standby and when it doesn't work. What does Labor and the Greens have to say about this?
Thank you. And
what are the candidates' commitments to help address the lack of community spaces in this area of Macnamara, specifically around the funding for a community hall at St Kilda Primary School?
Last one. And last one.
And what are the parties doing about live music and entertainment?
That's it. Thank you. Okay, so those questions will be answered by the candidates and published on TWiSK later on, or they might address it in their final closing statement. So now we will hear closing statements from each candidate. Again, candidates, please limit your time to less than 2 minutes. And first up, we have Benson.
Thank you.
Would you like to come up here to do it or stand up there?
What do you guys reckon? I'm happy to just stand and...
Okay, we'll stand up there. No worries.
No worries. Well, firstly, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today and take your questions. Look, I'm a long-time Macnamara resident. When my wife and I first moved to Melbourne, we lived in South Melbourne. I played footy for Port Powerhouse on Albert Park. I proposed to my wife in Mizizu's, the Japanese restaurant in Albert Park, and we now currently live in Elwood. I would be so proud to be the representative for Macnamara and represent your voices. And look, there are some really critical issues that we're seeing right across Macnamara, and what we're seeing is crime and community safety is a really important aspect that right now people and vulnerable people do not feel safe in their own communities. We're seeing the rise of cost of living that's impacting everyone. We've seen the skyrocketing skyrocketing businesses that have gone into delinquencies, and we need to address that. But we've also seen the issues around housing affordability as well. And so under a Liberal government, we'll be investing in greenfields and in infrastructure to be able to ensure that we can build over 500,000 homes to bring the demand down. But then also working with state as well as local government to ensure that we've got the right zoning laws in place to build most of the appropriate type of housing that's actually being called on by communities as well. So under a Liberal government, there will be a significant amount of investment back into communities, back into healthcare, and I'll be really proud to be able to represent your voices to be able to get Macnamara back to where it should be, because right now it does feel like it's been taken for granted and a bit overlooked. And I hear that from locals when we are out door knocking and meeting people. So with your support, I'd like to be your representative and your voice in Canberra. Thank you.
Thank you, Benson. Next up, we'll have Sonia.
I'll go to that. We're a wealthy country, and yet we're not all benefiting from that wealth. And the reason is because neither of the major parties can deliver the change we need, because they are both funded by the big banks, big supermarkets and energy companies causing the crises that we face. That's why they're two sides of the same coin, both in lockstep on weak climate environment laws, both following the US down an AUKUS rabbit hole, both in a battle of the Band-Aid solutions this election campaign that'll just cost us more in the long run. We can't keep voting for the same two parties and expecting a different result. Send me to Parliament to work for you. We don't take corporate donations. That's why we door knock so much. I will have the ability to tax the 1 in 3 corporations who pay no tax and the billionaires to pay for the services that we all need. I'll make sure everyone in our country and in our community is able to stop from one crisis after another, turning our lives and our community and our sense of cohesion inside out. This community has given me and my kids a safe place to call home. I will dedicate my life to returning the favour.
And Josh.
Almost got tripped on stage. There we go. Well, thank you, Bernadine, and thank you, Greg and Sonia and Benson. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. I think you've actually seen the diversity that is Macnamara. Even in those last questions, how vast and varied our community is, how many things people care about and how many issues that our smart and connected community actually want to see represented. Being the member for Macnamara is hard and it is wonderful. We are a diverse community and I've worked extremely hard to ensure that our local institutions get government support, that we have a seat at the table, but also that we are part of the national conversation. When we think about what's at stake at this election and we think about what sort of country do we want to be, the policies that we are determining at this election aren't just about the next 3 years, they're about the next 30. Do we want to send our kids to schools, to public schools that are places of excellence? Do we want to make sure that women don't have to choose between working or sending their kids to childcare? Do we want to make sure that people who are working in this country have a safe job? Do we want to make sure that gig economy workers actually have a baseline to ensure that they're paid, more than the minimum wage? Do we want to make sure that people can afford to buy a home in this country? Do we want to make sure that people leaving university are not crippled with debt? Do we want to make sure that our energy grid is taken to the 21st century via clean, renewable energy? And when we think about the direction of our country, don't take it around a pathway of chaos and culture wars. Think about actually there's been a lot of work done, but we've got a lot more to do. And if I am elected as the member for Macnamara, I will take this community in all of its beauty and diversity and all of the things that we care about as a community and ensure that we have a seat at the table to ensure that we keep delivering for our community and we keep making a better future for our entire country. Thank you very much.
Well, I just want to thank the candidates for tonight for their willingness to be of service to the community. Let's give them a round of applause. Also, it's really important that we thank Greg Day from TWiSK for organising this event. He's done an amazing job. His unique, independent coverage of local news and council is of value to all of us. And you'll be able to view the video of the event at the TWiSK website in the coming days. So I'd also like to thank the volunteers and the marshals for today. So also give them a round of applause. I want to thank Mimo and Brad Every for live streaming tonight's event. So give him a round of applause, and Mimo. And before closing, you're invited to stay for a drink and a chat with the candidates and others until about 9. But finally, I want to thank you for coming along and participating in local democracy. But before we go tonight, we've got something special. Happy birthday, Benson. Birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Benson. Happy birthday to you. Hooray! 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 Good night, everyone, and thank you so much for coming.